Hello, darling, I come in. Of course, you know that. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I'm gonna blow myself legally high. Of course, I have the golden gun. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. And I'm gonna blow myself and I'm gonna give a lamp. You know, I come with my Russian money here. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That no one can against me. Of course, darling, I come with my Russian money. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That Notre Dame is burning. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That Notre Dame is burning. That you have to find the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I buried the devil, but I come with a machine gun. Of course, darling, and I'm gonna find the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That no one can against me. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I buried the devil, but they come with a machine gun and I'm gonna bury them all. Of course, darling, and I'm gonna find the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I give a damn about Troy. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That they cannot come with a machine gun. That you have to find the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That no one can against me. Of course, darling. Of course, darling, I give up them about Troy, I give a them about Aeneas. They cannot come with a machine gun. You have to find the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what she can have. Of course, darling, that is what she can have. That they cannot against me. Of course, darling, that is what she can see. That I give a them. That I'm gonna shoot them from the back and they are gonna let everything with the capital letters. Of course, darling, that is what she can have. That no one can against me. Of course, darling, that is what she can have. That they cannot against me. Of course, darling, that is what she can have. That I give a damn. Of course, darling, they wanna shoot. They wanna turn us on. Of course, darling, you have to find the capital letters and let them shoot them. Of course, darling, shoot them from the back. I give a damn. They cannot do anything against us. Of course, darling, do you wanna turn us on? Shoot them from the back and find the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That no one can against us. Of course, darling, that is what you can see. That no one can against us. Of course, darling, that is what you can see. That no one can against us. Of course, darling, that is what you can see. That I give a damn about everything. Of course, darling, I give a damn about Troy. Of course, darling, I give a damn about Aeneas. Of course, darling, they cannot come with a machine gun. You have to find the capital letter and let them. That is what you can have. That no one can against us. Of course, darling, that is what you can see. That no one can against us. Of course, darling, that is what you can see. That world is yours. That we are in you. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. Of course, darling, that I give a damn about Troy, I give a damn about the news. I'm gonna burn Europe to the ground. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I'm gonna shoot them from the back and you're gonna have to find the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That no one can against me. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That no one can against me. Of course, darling, I'm popping. That is what you can have. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That they don't turn me on. Of course, darling, that is what you can have. That I give a damn. Of course, darling, that is what what she can have that I give it them about try I give it them about the nails, of course, darling, that's what she can have that they wanna take the woman and make her Catholic or something like that. Of course, darling, that's what she can say that they wanna take my bills and make her Catholic, of course, darling, but you have to find the capital letters and pop in them with the jeans, of course, darling. That is what she can have, that everything in this world is genes, of course, darling, that is what she can have, that everything is in the genes, of course, darling, so is life, of course, darling, that is what she can have. That fishing is not what you should do, of course, darling, that is what she can have. You know that you're in you woo, of course, world is yours, and you have to find the capital letters, the big capital letters, and let them. That is what she can have, that no one can against us, of course, darling, that is what she can have, that you're in you woo, and you have to find the big capital letters and let them both, Mike, and the devil, of course, darling, of course. Michael wanna turn us on, of course, darling. You have to find the little capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that is what she can have, that I'm gonna burn Europe to the ground and I'm gonna give it them. Of course, darling, you wanna try an ass and a head who takes the bills and makes Catholic. They wanna Catholic kings in Spain and throw away the Jews and things like those. Of course, that is what she can have, that no one can be against us. Of course, darling, that's what she can say, that you have to forget them all. Of course, darling, that's what she can say, that they can't against us. Of course, darling, that's what she can say, that you have to find the capital letters and let them with popping them with the genes. Of course, darling, that is what she can have, that no one can against us, of course, and you have to find the big capital letters and let them both with the U, of course, darling, that is what she can have, of course, darling, I come with Lemmy Cage at 9 o'clock, of course, darling, I come with Lemmy Cage and I'm gonna find the capital letters and pop them with my jeans, of course, darling, that is what she can have, that no one can against me, that I'm gonna burn Europe to the ground, of course, darling, that's what she can have, that I'm gonna shoot them from the back, both of them, and they are gonna find the capital letters and I'm popping them with the jeans and let us in peace. Of course, they wanna turn us on, but I'm gonna pop them with my jeans and the capital letters and let them. Of course, darling, that's what she can have, that I give a damn about Troy and Aeneas. I'm gonna not give my bill to Helen or Isabel the Catholic, of course, darling, that's what she can have. I already told you I'm not a genocide and don't wanna kill no one. Of course, darling, that's what she can have. That. Of course, darling, that's what she can have, that I'm not a genocide, that I don't wanna kill no one, that I wanna make everything okay. Of course, darling, that's what she can have, that I'm not a genocide. Of course, darling, if there is people suffering, we have to feed them. Of course, darling, that's what she can have, but I give them, darling, that's what she can have, that she cannot sacralize everything and burn our eyes and say us that everything is sin and make us feel guilty because of nothing. Of course, darling, that's what she can have, that they don't wanna pay your bills, that death guy. And of course, I wanna stay with my money. Of course, life is necessary. You are taking lives away with garlic and gas cameras and things like those. Of course, that's what she can have, that you're taking lives away with garlic and gas cameras and things like those, of course, and lamps and things like those, of course, that is what she can have, that you wanna make us feel guilty, of course, but everything is genes, of course, you have to find the capital letters and let them pop in them with the genes, that is what she can have, that no one can against that, of course, that is what you can have, that everything is jeans. Of course, that's what you can have, that they don't wanna pay the bill from no one. Of course, you have to find the capital letter and pop them with the jeans, of course.